Uh-oh. Hold on. It looks like this stream was deleted on Facebook. Try creating a new stream or just remove and re-add it. All right. Remove, delete from Facebook.
It says live from my end.
What is live? All right. I think we are. We're live on YouTube. We're not live on Facebook. Let's fix it.
Gotcha.
We should have started this earlier. Hold on. Okay. I think we are live. I think we're super good.
Perfect.
James, man, we've already done a little bit of catch up behind the scenes, but this is, as promised, live. We're going to interview you, a commission only sales guy, right? This seems to be a big topic. W-2s, 1099s.
Mm-hmm.
Is it better to have steady, consistent income with a base salary and a smaller commission? Is it better to have a higher commission but take on some of the risk?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do if you're trying to create stability and a quote unquote traditional career for yourself? You seem to have taken on a different approach, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to get into that. I want to get into the meat and potatoes. I think that I think it's important to share how we met because it's comical. Are you good if I delve into that a little bit? Actually, what was it like from your side? Because I kind of others there.
I have some opinions that not everybody agrees with, and that's okay. And I'm sure you're going to explain the whole story of everything that happened. But all I remembered, there was two things that happened simultaneously. You misunderstood one thing that I posted about, and I remember looking at it thinking, is this? I think he's just made a mistake, or maybe he's having a bad day. And then someone sends me a post of you absolutely roasting me, and I'm like, I don't even know this guy. And I read through it, and I thought, I think he's having a bad day, and I think he's misunderstood. I've rubbed him the wrong way. I'm just going to see how this plays out. And sure enough, here we are. And it's actually funny. The majority of people that have disliked something I've said or disagreed with something I've said, I mean, I'm not overly polarizing, but oftentimes we end up getting along quite well because we realize we're all chasing the same thing, just a different way to go about it.
Well, you know what? I would say you're politely polarizing. You're like, you're not afraid to say things. So here's the story for anybody. Like James and I, we've known each other, what, a month and a half, 2 months?
Yeah, about that.
Like not super long time. And I build sales teams, and James made a post about daily huddles. And I remember reading it, like followed you for a while with just kind of quietly reading great content. Like between you and Mike, like you two, I don't trust a lot of sales trainers, like almost none of them. And seeing you guys, the free content that you guys post, by the way, if you're watching this and you don't follow James, then follow James because his free content is better than most sales books, most sales trainers, like courses you can pay for. It's gold for free on his Facebook profile. But I was watching all of that, and then you struck a chord, I guess. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't think I was having a bad day, but just daily huddles. I remember thinking, how can you say that daily huddles are something that are, what was it, like a bit of a waste of time, or there's an opportunity cost?
All of those things. So I understand the idea of a daily huddle, and they are more typically applicable in two scenarios. If you have a brand new team of salespeople who have never sold before, and you have to build them up and teach them the ropes.
Yeah.
And the other time it's applicable is if you're in a corporate role where you're getting paid a salary base and you have a team of people that potentially are not that high of a standard, and you have to hold their hand. You have to watch them to actually make sure that they are doing what they need to do. Whereas if you're commission only, you're not getting paid for that time. And the opportunity cost of that time is actually quite substantial if you figure out the numbers associated with it. So if you're com only, you're losing hundreds of dollars typically per hour that you're sitting there in a huddle. And then if you extrapolate that out, I work with usually 3 companies at a time, then add in 15 hours per week unpaid.
Let's do this. I'm gonna do this while you're saying that. So 3 companies at a time. Are we taking an hour? I mean, you're missing the whole hour because you blocked 15 minutes.
You're the first person that's ever actually voluntarily said that, because I think in hour blocks in my calendar. Even if it's 5 minutes, there's
We're
an
not
hour
so
block
different,
on.
you and I.
Yeah, who'd have thought?
So you've got 3. So let's call it 3 hours, and let's say what's an average commission?
So let's say your comms are for this exercise will be reasonable, about 2.5K.
Okay, so 2.5K, and if your close rate is, let's just say 30%, conservative.
Okay. Yes, very conservative.
Because like for anybody who is watching, like there are some people out there, James included, who close 50, 60, 70, 80%. I don't know if it goes higher than that. I've not ever seen or I've not ever personally believed anyone when they say 90 plus, but I digress. We'll get into that more later, I'm sure. But so 3 hours, 30%. So let's just call it one deal miss. So 2.5K. And this is a daily huddle.
Mhm.
So potentially 2.5K a day? Or
No. So if you work, let's actually do the math on this. So if you work 10 hours a week, right? And your comms are 2,500 per sale.
Yep.
So that's 7,500 earned over 10 hours.
Got it.
So 7,500 divided by 10 is 750 an hour.
Yep.
Times
So
that
by 3.
5, 37.50.
Yeah, per week.
Per week. And then you
37.
extrapolate that out again. Say you work 40 weeks of a year, there's 150K.
Yeah. So short version, I challenge daily huddles because I build sales teams, and there's a certain, like, when you're trying to build sustainably, you have certain sales reps who can come in and sort of, they bring their ego with them. They bring a chip on the shoulder, and they stomp their feet and smack their hands on the table, and they make a big fuss. You got to do it my way or the highway. And it's like, at some point when you've got a team of 35 people, you're not interested in the bullshit, right? So I'm like, all right, daily huddles. This allows us to communicate quickly, 15 minutes at the beginning. And I made a big fussy post without full context. And James came in with his arms open, and he basically like wrapped me up in a big warm hug and made my day all better.
Yeah.
And we realized you're aiming to create sustainability for yourself as a sales professional, for sales professionals the world over, because there's a pretty enormous number of people who follow you. So making sure you give the right content with context, which I think we actually settled on, was like, hey, maybe I needed more context, and then I was able to quit huffing and puffing. But so fast forward, we've got a friendship now, we've got a relationship now where we've discussed actually what can we do to flip some of these industry norms on their head and try to actually create that sustainability for me on the company side and for you on the sales rep side. And you actually started teaching this to people, which we're not going to go into a sales pitch. Save yourselves. We won't do all that today, but you do now teach people how to create that sustainability, which is what intrigued me and wanted me to get you here for the SPG group.
So there's a couple of ways that I do it. So the only paid course that I have, which is so cheap, it's not even funny, teaches people how to successfully interview for a sales role. And the reason I put that together is everybody gets sales interviews wrong, because the crazy thing about sales interviews is we go in there and we're expected to act in a way that is the complete opposite of how we have to act to be successful in sales.
Will
Because
you elaborate on that?
the majority of times in an interview, if we're in an interview now, you would ask me a question and I would give you an answer. And then you would ask another question and I would give you an answer. But on
Yeah.
a sales call, we have to do the opposite. We have to ask questions, clarify, set the frame, probe, and figure out if there's a fit. So going into a sales interview, you're showing the worst possible version of yourself by conducting yourself in that manner. So
So I hit you with James. So James, tell me a little bit about your background. And are you immediately flipping the switch?
so what I would do in that scenario, and one fundamental of what I teach is, if you answer a question, you must ask a question. So I would first clarify. I'd say, is there anything in particular you want me to focus on?
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And if it's a real personal company, they might say, tell me about your life, your family, what you're interested in. And that's very different from most people jumping into their work experience.
Mm-hmm.
Or you might say, just focus on sales. So then I would give you a very linear answer from start to finish. Been in sales for 10 years, 4 of that in the remote sales space. I've worked in mastermind, SaaS, AI, sex coaching, all different kinds of things.
Yeah.
Then I would transition. And I'd say, the thing that I love about sales is you get so much variety and you learn so many new things. And I was looking at your website and I noticed you guys do this. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? So then I have turned it around, and then I'm going to ask you another question and another question.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bring together a few different sections of questions, initially gentle ones to turn the tables and get you feeling appreciated and heard. And then we're
Yeah.
going to go through operations questions. What does the company look like? How does it operate? What kind of standard operating procedures do you have? And then we'll go through statistical questions to get the OTE down to the dollar. And then we'll figure out whether you can actually take me on.
I love the way you did that, because you don't know anything about how I sell. At least I don't think you know anything about how I sell. But when I do a deep dive sales training, I do 4 questions: surface level, logic, emotion, and commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And you hit them with surface to kind of get them into a question answering pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And once they're in that, you hit them with statistical or logical.
Mm-hmm.
What's the mathematically, how can we prove this is a good idea?
Mm-hmm.
And then I imagine you go beyond that. That's cool. I like the correlation. So you turn it into a sales conversation.
It is, and it was born out of necessity, because if anyone in corporate is watching this, the space that we operate in is a lot more turbulent, and offers come, offers go. The
Yeah.
OTE is very rarely what it's advertised. So you have to have a system to clarify what that is, but also build a pipeline of offers. So if anything ever happens, you're fine. You've got another one that you can go to.
Would you do the same thing now, knowing what you know now, doing what you do now, the habit that you've created here? If you ever went back into like SaaS or tech or anything like that, would you still run your interviews the same way?
100%. Yeah.
Nice.
Because it's a different space. You get much better offers, you get much better terms, you can negotiate anything that you want on a call, because instead of you telling them how good you are, they are getting the experience on the call. They can see what it's like to be on a sales call with you. They can see the questions you're asking, and without a doubt, there's no way they can deny that you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I have a question for you. I promised the group that we would find out kind of what is a day in the life of James Lawrence. What does that look like? Like, for anybody who's watching, there's a lot of people who sell cars, who sell insurance, who sell houses, who do sell SaaS or technology. Then we have our high ticket space, which a lot of people look at, and I don't know. It seems to have a stigma around it with the world.
Mhm.
Some of the people, the quote unquote powers that be, who are spending tens of millions advertising, are tainting what used to be a pretty pure industry. Uh, and I think there is still a purity about it. But tell people what you do in your words, and
Mhm.
what does your day look like where it's maybe different than other players in our space.
So one advantage I have is I'm based in Australia. So my 7 a.m. is 2 p.m. Pacific. So the majority of times I actually start taking calls at that time. So because 2 p.m. is still in business hours, I'll take B2B calls. So I'll work with a B2B company, whatever that may look like, for 3 to 4 hours, and I'll take calls for them. And then what I'll do is I'll work with a B2C, because then I'll catch people after they've finished work, after they're relaxed, they're at home, they've finished for the day, they can actually chat. They're not going to text me and say, oh, sorry, I don't have availability. I got called into a meeting. And that's really desirable for US companies, because they
Yeah.
can't get anyone that covers nights, because people want to spend time with their family. But that's my morning. So it's just after 7 o'clock in the morning here, and this is my peak time of day. So I'll take 3 to 4 hours of US B2B, and then typically 2 to 3 hours in there of B2C, and then I'll go to jiu-jitsu for a few hours, and then I'll come back. And I always work with one Australian company, always really low volume, and I'll take 1 to 2 calls in the afternoon. And some days I might have a full calendar, and some days I might have 2 to 3 calls.
Yeah. That's really, really cool, the way that the timing works out for you.
Mm.
So sales manager talking here.
Mm-hmm.
How do you manage your focus? Like, not confusing, and maybe I'm overthinking this, but not confusing yourself or mixing up CRMs or what has to be done. Like, there's more that goes into this than just having a sales call.
Mm-hmm. So I've got a system that took a long while for me to figure out. So I have a different user profile on my Mac for every company. So if I'm on a sales call with you now, I'm going to be logged into that user profile. But then if I have a sales call with a different company afterwards, I just switch user, and I'm logged into their Zoom, their CRM, their Slack, all of their communication channels. And I have one central hub that I
Yeah.
keep all of my information on, which is one Google profile. So I have 2 screens. So I've got one here and one there. So on this screen is my Google, my central hub. And on that, I've got all of the scripts, all of the things that I will need universally between each profile.
Yeah.
And then on this screen, I have the company's Google account, and that includes their Stripe, their CRM, all of their information. And that's all
that.
there. So it doesn't matter what I need. I've got it straight away.
That's cool. So you're super organized would be a way to describe your day. That's awesome.
I love systems. And by having all of that in place, it's so easy for me to just start and do what I need to do.
But the remote high ticket space. So a lot of people, let's clear the air a little bit. We can both do this because I think it's important. And I don't know if I can see who all specifically is watching right now, but high ticket space, a lot of courses, coaches, consultants, marketing agencies, every once in a while a SaaS product, right? Am I missing any boxes?
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
And inside of those four, you're going to have paid media strategies or agencies, organic media, SEO agencies. Then you have, like you said, fitness and sex coaching. There is dating. Like, there's the three big. What are the three big ones? Health, wealth, and love, I think, are the three big categories. So fitness, nutrition coaching, you've got all kinds of stuff. Diet, people who coach you on how to turn around your metabolism, all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Then you got your business coaches and consultants, people who teach operations, people who teach client fulfillment, people who teach things effectively, sometimes in a group format, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes it's a mastermind where it could be a combination of group, in person, digital, right?
Yeah.
All these different things. And to clear the air, we're not talking about like, oh, those guys are MLM guys. We're not pyramid schemes. So these are legit offers that you're on. Are you able to share any, like, maybe I'm asking too much, but well, let's use some generic examples. So people like Tony Robbins, I would say Dean Graziosi, but he's been hit with a crazy lawsuit here recently that's given him some heat. But you've got Tony Robbins, Jesse Itzler, who's like one of the owners of the Atlanta Hawks. He's got I think a 100K program, a 25K program, and these things pay commissions anywhere from 5% to 25%. Maybe even more. Commission only, 1099, work for yourself, do your own thing. And well, so let's talk. I assume you've been through some of the early stage issues that come with this, where a 1099 treats you like a W-2 or something like that. What was your experience early on, and how did you end up figuring out what you do now?
I had a very low threshold for that from the beginning because I came from 6 years in corporate, and by the end, it wasn't, do I make a change? It was, I have to leave. I wasn't an employee. I didn't like being part of a team in that manner. I didn't like the corporate mindset, and I didn't like how low the standard was. And that sounds awful to say. I worked with some great people, but towards the end, the acceptable standard was so low, and I was really unhappy, really, really unhappy. And that's what ultimately made me make that transition to remote sales and commission only, because I set my own terms. I am in complete control of my income. And I've had a lot of opportunities where I can get a very good, consistent income, stick with one for a while, but you have to be an employee. That's not why I entered this space. And everyone has different priorities. So there are some people that just want money, and they're prepared to do 10 to 12-hour days as a 1099, and they'll go to their huddles, they'll do all of the right things, and that's okay. Like, that's great for you. Whereas I know that you can make that money and more by not having to do any of that sort of stuff and having as much flexibility as you want. Does it take longer? Yes. And it is a lot more work, a lot more networking, and it does take a while to figure out. But initially, when I first started, I accidentally ended up in a team that was like that. And there was the light bulb a couple of weeks in, and I thought, oh, this is not why I entered this space.
Yeah.
It's not.
Tell me what those red flags are for you.
Yeah. How a manager treats their people. And that's a big reason that I interview the way that I do, because some managers are my way or the highway. You must bow down and worship me. Otherwise, you're out. And my 2 cents on what it takes to work cohesively with an offer. And again, if you're interviewing for a role, they only want two things. And I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. So all they want in a salesperson is that you can come in and execute to a high level in a way that they're comfortable with. So if you come in and you can't sell, but you do it their way, well, you're probably not going to be there long. Or if you come in and you sell really well, but you do it in a way that's completely incongruent with how the company likes to sell, then again, that's not going to work. But if you can come in and at the start, let them know, this is the way I like to sell, this is what it's going to sound like, this is how it's going to feel, they're okay with that, and you can come in and do really well, that's box number one ticked. And number two, you're not going to make their life difficult, because you have probably hired a lot of salespeople, and as soon as they get started, you think, I wish I had not have hired this person.
That's happened before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if those are the things that I need from my end, and that's the thing, or those are the things that hiring managers need from your end. And at the end of the day, if you can come in, you don't burn their leads, you sell at a high level in a way that they're comfortable with, and they're okay to let you do that, knowing that you're not going to skip over admin, that you're going to do everything that they want on the back of them having huddles.
Yeah.
There's never a problem. But sometimes you get people that run offers, they're like, no, it must be done this way, even though you know that they're leaving so much on the table. For me, that's a red flag. I've
That's actually
had
that's how I got into this space, because I am what you would say unemployable. Uh, like
yeah.
very, I think it was is it Robert Greene who wrote 48 Laws of Power? Have you ever been through that book?
Yes, I have.
Super manipulative book, like,
Yeah.
but also like eye opening. It's worth a read, and also like it's public enough that don't try to use it to manipulate people. We're adults here.
Mhm.
But there is one that stands out. That's don't outshine your master, right? A lot of sales managers or any kind of boss doesn't want to be outshined,
Mhm.
and there's a certain way to take credit for something, or don't take credit for something in order to play the game.
Mhm.
I'm not very good at playing that game.
Mhm.
It's like, if this seems inefficient, I'm gonna say something, and if you don't like it, I'm gonna tell your boss. Like,
Mhm.
we're
Yeah.
not, we should not do this. And if you can't see it or hear it, anyways, it probably meant like early in my career I was not very good at selling the ideas. There was probably some of that, but also like that efficiency, it should be there. And I think one of the reasons I've had success managing people is I love the feedback from my team.
Yep.
But I think the expectation, there's a quote that I love, is disappointment is only possible when expectations are not met or set.
Mhm.
And I think like you're kind of hitting the nail on the head here. Like, get the expectations out there. And if your manager's not clear enough on what his expectations are or her expectations are,
Mhm.
it makes for such a bumpy ride.
You said something before that you're not good at that game. There are, particularly in corporate and teams, the majority of the time, there are two things that you need to be really good at. And one, you need to be able to sell. But the more important thing, particularly in a corporate style role, is you need to be good at the corporate game. You need to know who to schmooze, who to not say anything to or about. There are all of these politics at play.
Yeah.
I was never good at that. I just wanted to sell, and I love doing it. It makes me happy, and I would be out, selling, doing what I needed to do, and I would neglect the whole corp. It just the
Yeah.
game never. I never enjoyed it, and I was never good at it. And I'd be out there selling, and there would just be this alarm going like, you've got to participate in this. And the reason I left corporate is I hit that point where the corporate game was consuming too much, and the corporate ladder for me, it wasn't something that I wanted to climb. It wasn't what I wanted to do. Um, but it was interesting when you said the game. I was no good at it either.
Yeah. What do you think? Why do you think that is? Why do you think you're bad at the game? Or, I don't mean to say you were bad at the game, but for lack of better words, you said you weren't good at it.
It just doesn't interest me.
Yeah.
I I think I think in corporate you're promoted because you're good at the corporate game, not because you're really good at your job.
Yeah.
And the majority of the time, I've heard this saying a lot of times, people that are promoted to sales manager, they were a good salesperson but a bad manager. And I think just because you're really good at something doesn't mean that you're going to be really good at the next level. And I
Yeah. Yeah.
found that particularly towards the end, the sales managers I got, all I need from a sales manager is someone that's going to be a conduit for my success and our success collectively. So I need them to, what do you need to get the job done? This, and this. Cool. I'm going to clear the way. you go out and get the results.
Yeah.
And I found that I had to very much pander to their ego, their personality, and all I wanted to do was sell. That's what I enjoy. And it was just, well, no, you can't outshine. You can't sign that contract this month because they've done this. It was just, it just didn't interest me. And I've never enjoyed getting into politics, getting into bickering or anything like that. And I think that was just the extreme version of it.
So I'm going to touch on another bullet point from my post I sent out yesterday, and that is approaching the interview from a position of power. We touched on it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go into that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I want to understand, like, the whole thing for me in anything that I do is let's give as much or more value than we even feel comfortable doing. You share as much as you feel comfortable. I'm just going to ask you questions though. But I want to know, what does it take for you to take an interview? Is there a prerequisite before you'll even consider an interview?
So before I get on an interview, I'm going to ask some basic questions about, it's typically statistics, as in what was the last few months revenue, or I'll ask them to tell me, tell me a little bit about the company, about the offer, about yourself.
Yeah.
And they'll usually send me some messages about it. And I understand that well over 90% of the interviews I go on, I'm going to say no, but I'm going to leave there giving them something.
Yeah.
And if I speak to a new company, they typically need one of three things. One, they need to sell more themselves and refine the offer. Or
Themselves as the owner.
as the owner, yeah.
Okay.
Because some people are making 5K a month revenue and they want to bring on 3 salespeople. And well, no, you don't have proof of concept yourself. These are the steps that you need to take.
Yeah.
And then the second option is, you've got a gold mine here, but you don't have any systems to make this work. So I'll connect them to my systems guy, and he'll go in, set it up, and knock it out of the park. And then 3 to 4 months later, there's a fully operational company that I can work with.
Yeah.
Or the third option is, they do need a salesperson. And if I can take some on, I might open a couple of hours a day, make sure, again, get my proof of concept, or I'm going to refer them to another salesperson.
Yeah.
So either way, I'm leaving that interview having given them something. And that's how I've managed to connect with so many different companies, because I always try and leave them more than they started with.
I love that. I love that so much. Somebody said to me earlier today, one of my sales reps, he actually is in the physical location where the company's headquarters is. So he likes to go into the office so he can just be in the environment. And he told me, like, I commend him. I don't know if he's watching or not, but his name's Caston. He said he likes to get there before anyone else gets to the office, and he likes to leave after. Like, that's a very, forgive me, Caston, for this, that's a super employee mindset thing, but it's a super value driven thing to say.
Yep.
He wants to be and give his most important asset, his time, to the company mission, which tells me he's super bought in. And I love the attitude. Translated in the future, it looks kind of like what you're doing, where you'll give time. And even these are, for what it sounds like, this is a bit of free consulting calls to some of these offer owners, and you're buying their buy-in in you for the future.
Yeah. With that as well, if they have nothing, as in they're just starting up, they're starting an agency, anything like that, I'm not going to take that call. I'm going to tell them what they need to do. Whereas if it comes through and it looks good, it looks like there's some potential, I'll take that call. But
I don't know who that is, but somebody puts,
that's Nick.
Sweet baby James.
That's Nick. So that's what I have to do to take that call. But you said the original question was interviewing from a position of power.
Yeah.
If you reframe everything, sales is a big bottleneck in a company, and it's really hard for a sales role to be filled with someone to a high level. And I know it doesn't feel like this if you haven't spoken to a lot of companies, but the percentage of people that are very capable in sales is incredibly low. And the majority of people that are going to be applying for it kind of fell into sales, and they're kind of trying to make it work to get the bare minimum. So if you can reframe that as the company has a problem that they need to fill, and you could potentially be the solution to that, and they're also interviewing for you, it changes the dynamics in the call. And that doesn't mean you can be dismissive or arrogant, but it just changes the way that you conduct yourself in the interview.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you find that most people are pretty receptive to it? Like
Oh yeah.
you're obviously good at sales. So I won't say any names, but I spoke to someone recently who drank the Kool-Aid all in. He's a fan of yours and some of your network, and he took some of this advice. And I'm going to give you some real feedback here, and I want to hear what your thoughts are. He
Mm-hmm.
actually lost a job because he took your advice. Do you know who
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about?
I know who you're talking about, but I think we need to add a layer of context to that.
Let's do it. Yeah, let's do.
Imagine if you and I negotiated, and what we're talking about is not an interview strategy. We're talking about a sales strategy.
Yeah,
So let's pretend that you have just hired me. You know, we're working together,
you're hired.
and yeah, thank you. And we agreed to terms that I'm going to sell your way.
Yeah,
And then I come in, I do that for a couple of months, and then without communicating it to you, I start selling a complete different way. And then you say, don't do that. And I
yeah,
keep doing it. Would you consider that cause to say, if you don't stop doing this, you're going to be gone? And then if I keep doing it, you're probably going to get rid of me.
yeah. Of course, that's like a major pet peeve is when I love ideas. Let me preface with this. I love ideas, innovation, growth. I want people engaged so much that they want to bring ideas. So as a manager, it's very, very difficult to navigate. We have a system that works. Please follow the system,
Mm-hmm.
at least to a degree, so that we can tell, how do you rank? Like, are you to a place where I should be taking your advice,
Mm-hmm.
or should I be testing and trying? I think
Mm-hmm.
that there's no such thing as black or white when it comes to sales. Everything is up for scientific process, like
Yeah.
establish control, test for variables, figure out what needs to be the actual process. And when you think you have that process, keep testing, because it
Mm-hmm.
can always be something improved. So I did have full context. I had a full conversation with him. And I think the other thing too is a difference in, I don't know about you. How long have you been in sales total?
Just over 10 years.
10 years. So a
Yeah.
decade.
Yeah.
So a difference in 10 years versus 2 years. There's one thing that you cannot replace with
Mm-hmm.
books, audiobooks, podcasts. It's repetition, right? And I feel like maybe what would you say the context is for somebody who's newer and wants
Mm-hmm.
to play approaching? This is a great, actually, I love this question. I don't know how my brain got here, but what would you say to someone who is one in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years? Maybe they've had a couple good sales days, they've closed some deals, they're starting to gain some confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And then they hear this interview and they say, you know what? That's great. I'm going to approach my very next interview like that.
um, okay, so you're talking about actually interviewing for a role. They've got 6 to 12 months under their belt, and now they're looking
For
for another.
this, yeah, let's keep the context here, and then I'll maybe re-ask in terms of the sales strategy that you
Yeah.
guys talk about too.
Yeah. So the interview process, don't take what I've said on this call and try and do it. Because if you try and do that without actually going through everything, the full course, you're going to get the intended outcome. Sorry, you're going to understand the intended outcome and purpose, but you're not going to understand the context and reasoning. So I have people that are brand new to sales that have gone through it, and they've secured jobs that they never would have got without it, because instead of going in and being really nervous in an interview, or what are they going to say, or what can I say that they might like, they understand, well, this is the exact system that this interview is going to follow. I know that this is what they're going to ask, and I know how I'm going to answer that, but these are all of the things that I need to ask to demonstrate my worth. And if you're conducting yourself like that in an interview when you're first starting out, that is so much better of an impression than if you were brand new to sales and they ask you about your experience. You're like, I don't have any sales experience. How do you come back from that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. You want to hear something funny? Do you know, you remember the Dan Locke days?
Yeah.
Were you around for that?
Yeah.
So at the time, I had a lady named Mary handling a lot of our interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And she came to me and she was like, I'm not taking another one. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? She's like, I will never interview a Dan Locke student again.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what? Why? I was like kind of laughing, but also trying not to, because she was clearly upset and frustrated. It was just the thing she was saying was funny to me. So what she would do is she would say, tell me a little bit about your experience. And then every single one of them had the same canned response. They would say, do you want somebody who has experience, or would you like somebody who can close deals? And she would just hang up the phone. We ended up interviewing, I think, 85 people from Dan Locke's Academy.
Oh, yeah.
And I just told her, like, just ask early if you don't want to interview them, like, you're in charge. Like, go ahead, whatever process you want. So what would you say? What would you say to that? Well done or poor taste?
Hang on. Well done to Mary. Are we talking
Well,
about Mary's
well,
response, or
no, the Dan Locke folks. Is that
no?
an appropriate strategy?
No. That's so cringe, because you're immediately making the interviewer have to defend themselves,
Yeah.
and you're not communicating as equals anymore. They have to defend themselves. They're like, well, no, I want this. It's
Have you ever heard the quote, if they say it, it's true. If I say it, I have to defend it?
no, I haven't heard that.
Oh my God, it's brilliant. It's beautiful. And with context, I think maybe you'll appreciate it. So the idea is 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? Listen twice as much as you speak.
Mm-hmm.
Ask a lot of questions. If somebody in an interview asks you, tell me about your background, and you just start speaking, well, if I say it, then I have to defend it. So if I didn't have the proper context,
Mm-hmm.
now I'm defending my case. And I'm also probably nervous because I wasn't answering the question you actually wanted me to answer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So quality in, quality out. Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
could have asked a better quality question. But if they didn't, whose responsibility is it to get the quality of the question? Arguably, it's the sales rep,
It's the
right?
salesperson, and
Yeah.
I actually covered this in Mike's program last week before. The majority of salespeople create their own objections on an interview and on a call because they answer questions when they don't know the true intention of why the person is asking.
Yeah.
So if you blindly respond to something, then you're just creating an objection later, because that's not the question they were asking. This is the real question they were asking. And then there's this really famous paradox, famous, well-known, whatever you want to call it, in sales, that the more experienced a salesperson gets with an offer, their income goes from 0 to 80 really quickly. And then after a couple of months in the role, it kind of peaks and then comes back down, and then goes back down to, say, we'll go numbers for percentage, maybe about 40% or 35. And that's the point where most people quit sales, because they had this big spike at the middle, and they get frustrated at themselves because they can't replicate it.
Yeah.
But the reason they can't replicate it is, at the beginning, they weren't answering questions because they didn't know the answer. And the simplest term of that, the simplest example, is if you're selling a coaching program and you know it has coaching sessions a few nights a week, and the prospect says, what nights are the coaching sessions? And the new sales rep can't answer that because they don't know. They're like, I'm not sure. I can find out. Is there nights that you can't do? They might say, I can't do Tuesdays. Say, no worries. If it was on Tuesdays, or if it were on Tuesdays, would you be comfortable to watch the replay the day after? Oh yeah, that's not a problem at all. Objection removed. Whereas if the sales rep says, oh no, we have the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at 7:00. And then straight away the prospect's like, I knew you'd say that. Can't do Mondays. I've got my kids. Can't do Tuesdays. I'm at church. Can't do Wednesdays. I play bingo. Sorry. And
then that's an interesting prospect. Carry on.
Yeah. So what you've done then is you've created a system whereby you now have to overcome all of these objections, and they've already decided that it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's I can't even remember how I got there, but that's an interesting little.
I don't know, but it was great.
Yeah.
Keep going, James. So I'm just kidding. But what? So what do you think? What's the biggest piece of value if someone were earlier in their career in the high ticket space? What do you think the single biggest piece of value you could give to them is?
Stretch out the time horizon. And it's really hard because everyone is brought into the remote sales space in particular thinking that they're going to make 50K in 90 days.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen because you need the time to build up those reps and build up that resilience. And if you look at it potentially in a staggered structure, if you're just beginning, you need to find an opportunity where you're going to learn how to get rejected. You're going to learn how to fail. You're going to have to practice a lot. So you're going to have to get a lower ticket, typically because a company's not going to want to risk their 25K ticket on someone who's brand new.
Sure.
So aim initially for a lower ticket, higher reps. Fitness is a good example of this. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Get rid of that nervousness to pick up the phone. And then following that, maybe you've done that for 12 months. You've ticked some boxes. You've made some money. You want to make a little bit more. Take that next step to a slightly higher ticket, maybe a higher level team, more sophisticated market. Learn how to play at that level. And then once you do that for a period of time, you're getting better at sales. You're making money. You're not scared anymore. You've made the decision that this is the place that I want to go. At that point, that's when you start looking at your much higher tickets, your much more sophisticated markets. That's when you have permission to go into a role and actually set your terms.
Yeah.
So don't think about the money that you're going to make next week, because if you're working really hard to make money next week, you're not going to make any money in 6 months. But if you look at the money that you're going to make in 12 months, you start making a lot smarter actions, or taking a lot smarter actions, and you end up making more money in the short term as well.
Yeah. Tony Robbins, what did he say? Most people grossly overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and severely underestimate what they can accomplish in 10.
Yep.
Which is huge. Man, I love that you went there, because I spoke to a rep recently who had this idea of 50K months. 50K months, like, what is that? 12 times 5, $600,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's doable. I know people who do it. Like, it's unrealistic though when you look at the way that our industry was built, and even from a macroeconomic standpoint, or even a microeconomic standpoint. From an economic standpoint, when you look at the number of people, individuals in the United States or the world over, but specifically the United States, because a lot of the offers will be in the United States.
Yep.
Like 3%. Now, these numbers have changed, I'm sure, with inflation over the last few years. But last I saw, individuals, 3% of the population earns over 100,000 per year. 3%. 9 out of 10 people in the United States have less than $1,000 in their checking account. 9 out of 10.
Yep.
Theoretically, there's probably some logical fallacy. You could probably poke that, prod that, attack it from every direction, and find some ways to poke holes in it. But maybe they have savings accounts or investment vehicles or whatever. And maybe our marketing targeting is not attracting those people. Well, I don't know that statistics necessarily care how your targeting is set up. I think that they're pretty inclusive. So when you talk to sales reps who say they want to do 50K, it's difficult you don't want to shoot them down. Right?
But why do they want to do 50K a month?
Yeah. Well, freedom. I assume almost everybody, like even myself, it's literally on my board right here. Like freedom seems to be at the top of everybody's list. Escape the rat race.
I'm going to give you a slightly alternative view on freedom. It doesn't take 50K a month to get freedom. If you strip back what your life expenses really are. Now, I understand you have kids and a family and everything like that. But if you were to strip back what your bare minimum expenses per month were, or even we'll strip it back per week, it's probably going to be between 1,500 to 2K.
Yeah. For me, it's a bit higher, but keep going.
Yeah. So I think being in corporate teams where the tape measure was always out and it's who has the nicest car, who has the nicest suit, who's making the most money, who's spent the most on a house, who bought things on the weekend. I competed in that for a while and it did not make me happy. And that was when I was chasing those big dollars. Miserable. Whereas now I live in a place called the Sunshine Coast. For those that don't know, it's a little tropical paradise in Queensland in Australia. And I am the most basic person you've ever met. My freedom comes at about $1,000 a week. Anything above that for me is a bonus. Now, obviously I'm above that. But if you break it down to what does freedom actually mean to you? And freedom for me is autonomy, the ability to conduct my life on my terms, not have restricted hours, not have people telling me what to do, being able to help the people that I want to help, being able to spend time with family. And that's come in the past few years in particular. Someone gave me this will go a little bit morbid, a little bit somber for a second. Someone asked me how old my parents were and then how often I saw them. And they were both early 60s at that point. And I saw them 2 to 3 times a year because I live a fair way away. And they said, let's assume that your parents live to 70. You're going to see them 20 to 30 more times in their life. And that just flipped a switch in me. And I thought, I can spend more time and probably make an extra 15 to 20K a month working like crazy. But is that 15 to 20K per month going to matter once I look back and think I spent all of that time working and I didn't get to see my parents? I didn't get to see my family. I didn't get to enjoy life. Whereas I think the way I operate now, I can still earn that really good money, but I can do it via flexibility. And I think if you're constantly chasing that 50K thinking it's going to give you freedom, it's going to be really hard for you to actually ever obtain freedom because more is infinite.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that one. And when you're a parent, here's one for you. Your kids typically leave at 18 years old. I'll have a 14-year-old, and I'm a divorced dad. So she lives with, I actually have her and my biological son live with their mother. And that we co-parent very well. So I get my kids whenever I want them, but they live an hour and a half away. So she'll be 14. My oldest will be 14 on October 26th. 4 years from now, she will be able to leave the
Mhm.
house and do whatever it is that she wants to do. That means I have 4 summers. That's it. 4 summers.
4 summers. Oof.
That's so wild. And I have a
Yeah.
9-year-old too, 2 9-year-olds, an 11-year-old. So at the max, I've got 9 summers with children at home.
Mhm.
And it makes actually Nick Lucas, I've done an interview with him here. And if you haven't met him yet, I'm going to introduce you because he's a wizard. He talked to me about being a steward of your moment.
Mhm.
Like just being an absolute steward of every single moment. You can't worry about the future because it hasn't happened yet, and you can't concern yourself with the past because it already happened. So
Yep.
the only thing you can do is be a steward of this moment.
Mhm.
And what are you going to do? What do you choose to do with this moment? Well, I don't know why that individual wanted 50K per month. I have some context, but I can't share too much because it's revealing. But um, I don't know. I did that rat race too, man.
Mhm.
Uh, like, and to a degree, I'm in the middle of a startup right now. I'm still doing that rat race to
Yep.
to a degree, but with a little more awareness,
Mhm.
right?
There's nothing wrong with wanting that amount of money, but where we enter the high ticket space being told that 10K is the marker. But what about the 10K do you want? And what about the 50K do you want? And you
Mhm.
can spend all of your time pursuing that one thing and forgetting and missing everything that's happening here, and being a steward of your moment. That's such a nice way to put it.
Yeah, I think so. One of the big takeaways from that conversation with her, and for anybody who's listening, I would love to hear your take on this as well. But clarity. So we're already
Mhm.
talking about clarity. What do you think the key points for you were, and how clear do you feel is appropriate when you're trying to decide your vision, your mission, just personally as a
Mm.
sales professional? Like, do you have it? Do you have like a vision board with like your dream house and that sort of stuff on it, or like is it timelined out on a calendar like that one?
Um,
What do you think's appropriate?
if we peel it back a layer, and this is not specific to salespeople,
Yeah,
I think the majority of people create their identity around what everyone else's version of them looks like,
yeah,
because everyone has a version of who you are. So if you go back in life to when you were younger and used to party, and you hang out with the people, or you go and catch up with people you might have gone to clubs with, that's the version they have of you. And if they contrast that with the current version of you, like, I don't even know that guy.
yeah,
And if you consistently stay in the environments where everyone's version of you is one particular thing, it can be really hard to actually get a vision for what you want your life to be.
yeah,
So I think initially, to get an understanding of what you need in life, you first have to identify who you are without the impression or expectations of others. And for me, that took a one-way ticket overseas. I woke up one morning and it was, I'm going to quit my job today. And I bought a one-way ticket. All my stuff was moved into a friend's garage and I was gone. And that's a very extreme way to do it. But I
yeah,
knew that the version of myself at that point in my life, in corporate, how I was showing up, how I was conducting myself, it wasn't who I wanted to be, but I knew I couldn't figure it out in that environment. So now the the guiding light for me, you could say, is not necessarily an outcome. It's not a house, it's not a car. It's it's a level of freedom and autonomy that is not only enjoyable now, but I can carry it into the future. And if I can explain it, I thought even a few years ago that I wanted to retire at 35, make the money, invest it, and then cruise. But I've realized that I don't think that's the play, because I love what I do. I can get up, I speak to really sophisticated people, really smart people, I sell solutions, earn money that allows me to live the life that I want and more.
Yeah.
I can go international whenever I want. I can go and see my family. I am creating wealth for the future, regardless of what I decide to do with it. I'm still investing it. But I always try and think, okay, I have to make a concession now for something in the future, but am I going to throw away everything that I've worked for? Or am I going to be more unhappy consistently for the opportunity cost?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
I,
I think having the house on a vision board for me, it's like, well, if that's the end goal, I'm not going to be a steward, in your words, a steward of the present.
you know what? I think so. You said it was kind of extreme to move overseas. I've seen a lot of people have breakthroughs
Mm-hmm.
and gain clarity. And unfortunately, and especially in sales, we can speak to this, but it seems like there has to be an awakening. There has to be an eye-opening moment. So it's either through consultation, through questions, really, really well asked questions from somebody who's done the work,
Mm-hmm.
somebody who has already asked these questions of themselves. Because you can't, I don't think you can truly ask from a place of power unless you've done the work yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you feel about that, but like to lead somebody who's struggling to make decisions, like really big decisions, if you haven't ever challenged yourself to find that clarity, maybe it is moving across the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
I actually challenged a gentleman the other day to write his last letter, to pick everybody who is important to him. I gave him, quote unquote, 24 hours to live. And I said, you've got 24 hours to write everything that you would want to write to everyone you've ever let down. You need to apologize to anybody that you have never complimented that you think deserves it, anybody and everybody. And the reason is, when you put your mindset in a place where you're dead tomorrow, you can't wake up.
Yeah.
Your brain can't tell the difference between the fake version and the real version. If you truly go all in on that exercise, and it's revealing. Find out a lot about yourself when you start writing that. What's important to you, what you're guilty, what you feel guilt or shame
Mm-hmm.
over, what you're prepared to leave behind and let go of, right? So go
You
ahead.
would have heard of the Regent Beta paradox.
No, I love a good paradox. Tell me more.
So I'm going to butcher this, and I'll send you the link afterwards so you can watch the proper explanation. But the example that was used was, if you have to get from between where you are right now and somewhere that's 800 meters away, you're probably going to walk. However, if you have to get from between where you are now to somewhere that's 2 miles away, you're going to get in your car and drive. So paradoxically, you're going to get to a destination further away quicker than you would a destination closer. And an example of this in life is,
Hmm.
we probably all have that friend who hates their job. They don't like their life, but they don't like it enough to make a change. It's
Yes. Yeah.
just passable enough for them to accept it.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was a little bit worse, they would be in a worse scenario short term. However, they would make changes to be a lot happier long term.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think many people get to that point where it's bad enough that they have to make a change. I don't think many people in life, and this is a generalization, but I don't think many people in life get the opportunity to be genuinely unhappy with who they are and where they are in life, because I think that's when the real change happens.
Yeah.
And that's when the work happens. Whereas if it's just okay, it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Man, it drives me nuts. So Salespeople are a lot of jokes, especially outside of the high ticket space. There's a lot of jokes, cocaine and hookers.
Mhm.
Just, I know you're joking, but also, why are you joking about that? Like, is that
Mhm.
really where your mind is? Is that really the best use of the English language in this particular situation?
Yep.
Right. And I know, again, generalization, but I know it's because there's a discomfort that hasn't been addressed.
Mhm.
That's one of the reasons why I think I said, uh, I think you have to do the work in order to help someone else do the work, because you
Mhm.
can't possibly fathom what it is to go through it unless you've challenged yourself in that way.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
It's insane to yeah. I'll do the 3 circles in a second and show you the comfort zones.
There, do you have a realization in your life? Was it a conversation? Because I definitely have this, and I actually shared it with Mike about a month ago. Do you have a conversation or a moment in life when you realized that I can actually do whatever I want? Like this is my life. I
I can
can.
show you the Facebook post.
What was it?
So I have there's two that stand out to me. One, I wrote about becoming a general instead of a
Mhm.
pawn. I think it's probably 22 or 23. I had a mentor, um, an unpaid mentor, and I might have been a little older, but I was in the gym space still, selling gym memberships and doing everything I could to get away from gym memberships.
Mhm.
And tried to be a marketer, tried to be this, tried to be that. And okay, so I went to the event with Gulliver Giles,
Mhm.
and I was sitting on a tarmac in an airplane, and my dad called, my biological father, and like, he's still alive today. Dad, if you happen to see this, I love you. But he's kind of he's just a contrarian. Like, a lot of the time is, why would you do that? Or why'd you spend your money on that? Or, that doesn't seem like a very good idea, son. Everything was not good enough.
Mhm.
And I'm on this plane, and I remember at the time being like, I got a credit card in the mail to help me with some bills and keeping up with the fam. I had nothing in the bank account, obviously making great financial decisions at the time.
Mhm. Yep. Yep.
My I had my daughter, and I promised Gulliver, if he came to the United States, I will come to your training. And he called me like the day after that credit card came in the mail, and he said, "I'm coming to Scottsdale." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm I'm there. I told you I'd be there. Man of my word, I'm coming." So
Mhm.
I had $7,500 limit. I paid him like 2,500. I paid, I think, 3 grand for the hotel, and I had enough for an airline ticket, and I was gonna scrape by on food while I was there.
Mhm.
Like, fingers crossed that they pay for a couple meals. Like, I was having those sorts of moments. And I'm on the tarmac, and my dad calls me while I was still on the ground, still had signal, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, I was kind of excited to tell him, like, "Well, I'm on my way to Arizona." And I knew he was going to ask, "What are you going there for?"
Mhm.
I was like, "I'm going for a sales training," because I thought he'd be proud that I was spending money on some education or career related. Instead,
Yep.
he hit me with, "Why would you go to Arizona for that?" And I was like, "Well, because
Mhm.
this is like a famous sales trainer." And he was like, "You could have got sales training here." And I was like, "Yeah, but not from this guy." And he's like, "Well, community college has free classes for career development. Like, maybe you should have looked into that." And it was like, "Dad, we're getting ready to take off. Like, I gotta go." And I didn't talk to him again for a little while. At the event, everybody's having breakthroughs. Day number 2, dinner. President Barack Obama's social media manager a lady named Jen was sitting next to me at dinner, and she's like, so are you getting a lot out of the event? And I'm like, I see everybody having breakthroughs around me, but I'm not. Like, I haven't gotten the aha. I got great
Mm.
notes, and this is amazing, but I'm hoping for an aha. And she's like, well, why'd you come? And it hit me right then. I didn't have an answer, but the one that came to me was like, you know what? I just want to prove to my dad that I can do it.
Mm.
She was like, why? Like, so nonchalant, like it didn't even matter to her. She was like, why? Who gives a shit? And I was like, because, like, and I told her the story I just told you. Like, he's always putting me down, always making me feel bad about certain things. And she was like, why don't you maybe just do it for yourself? And it was like, I started pouring tears, crying, and I realized I don't have to prove anything to anybody.
Mm.
Only person I have to prove anything to is me. And the only thing that matters to me is, like, I'm not a super competitive guy, but
Mm.
I'll always show up. I'll always push the broom. I will always participate.
Mm.
And to me, it clicked. Like, as long as I'm happy and I'm doing it for me, that's all that mattered. And you know what happened since then? That one of the biggest ones was high D sales personalities, business
Mm.
owners, executives, father type guys. They used to crush me on calls. As soon as they would hit me, like, just tell me what the price is. I'm not interested in the back and forth. I used to crumble. And
Mhm.
then when I didn't care about what dad thought anymore, it hit me from that point forward. It was like, hey, look, I understand you'd like to find out what the price is. I have a process. And actually, I was put in this position because I have a unique talent that allows me to guide a conversation with intelligent people like yourself toward a finish line and to identify whether or not this is a good idea for us to move forward. If you would
Mm.
trust me with that process, then I think that we can make some really significant progress toward a decision or not a decision today, whatever. I don't remember the scripts I was using at the time, and
Mm.
I've adapted to a different way. I may or may not also use price at the front of a call these days, but that was the big one for me. When I came home, I wrote a post. I was tired of being a pawn, that I'm not working for anyone else anymore. I was going all in,
Mm.
and it was for me.
Mm. That's such an interesting story, and to come from such an influential person. And I think everyone was having breakthroughs. That moment when you were actually crying, that was your breakthrough. That was the big moment.
It was.
Yeah, yeah. And I find it interesting that you used to struggle selling to Ds. They are my favorite by a long shot.
Yeah, now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back then they weren't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me
Yeah.
why. Why? So you asked me, let's go back. You asked me if there was a moment for me. Was there a breakthrough moment for me? A pivotal moment? Why did you ask that?
Because I feel like for people to break out of the status quo, there has to be a moment. There has to be a check.
Yeah.
Something that happened where you realize that you are the lead player in your life. And the majority of people, again, generalizing, but the majority of people think that life happens to them and they're afraid to change. They're afraid to take risks. There's no way back. But I think failing and risk is a learned skill. And first, you
Mhm.
have to decide that you're going to be okay if you fail. And then you have to get through the failures a number of times.
Yeah.
But you have to have that moment when you realize I'm capable of doing this. And if I fail, it's going to be okay.
Yes. It's huge. So fail forward and fail faster are two of
Mm.
my big quotes. And I told you there was three circles. So circle one, comfort zone. Circle two, stretch. Circle three, panic.
Okay.
So most people live in their comfort zone. This little circle over here is just a comfort zone. hold on. I'll just let me illustrate for you. So comfort, stretch, panic.
Mm-hmm.
Most people live their life right here, whereas a stretch, a comfort zone is 5K per month. I have an apartment I can afford.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a Toyota Camry that I was given by my parents in high school. I still drive it.
Yep.
And then there's a little bit of a panic when you go get that first job. There's a little bit of a stretch. It's uncomfortable. Oh my God, the interview, it's scary. Unless you've done 400 interviews, and then it's not scary anymore. So what happens is you have to reach into your stretch zone, and it's important, I think, to actually identify these. Put some bullet lists. Draw the 3 circles if you're watching this, and write bullets with what are you comfortable with right
Mm-hmm.
now. Then write bullets with what feels like a little bit of a stretch, and then write your panic zone. Panic zone for me, like going to Mars. I would never like that. I don't even want to, but that's a big enough goal. Meeting your favorite celebrity. Matthew McConaughey is one of my favorite celebrities. I love his speeches and just his way of life. He just seems like a cool dude.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I would be starstruck by many people, but I feel like Matthew McConaughey could do it to me.
Yep.
I want to hang out with that guy, and that feels panicky to me. Um, like what else is it? So remoterep.com, building that. I want to build toward a $100 million exit. That's panicky to me. It was when I said it out loud the first time. It was like, oh my God, what will people think? Like
Mm-hmm.
that was panicky. But when you live in the stretch zone long enough, this circle gets bigger, and that's your new comfort.
Mm-hmm.
This is the new comfort zone. Your panic's no longer that far away,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes failure. You have to fail in order to find out what your limitations are,
Mm.
or that you have none.
One of my favorite quotes, and I think anybody that's ever spoken to me has heard it. It said, failure is where success likes to hide in plain sight. And after the biggest setbacks of my life, times where I've just sat down and thought, oh, that was a doozy. The best things and the biggest leaps, not coincidentally, came after that. And it happened a couple of times. And then I started realizing, well, there's so much opportunity in failure. What can I take from this? And
Yeah.
if I have a setback now, instead of that negativity that consistently creeps in when people fail, and that feeling that people build up in their mind, because failure is just the perception of how you're going to feel if things don't work out. But if you understand that it doesn't have to be that way, and there's a lot of opportunity there, something bad goes wrong, you'll have a little laugh to yourself. And then you'll ask the question, well, what can I do with this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, but did you die? Like just what you said is I've never heard it put that way. And then the way you described it afterwards is like failure used to feel like failing. It was the word you used was perception. Failure is the feeling you perceive, or I forget exactly the word you used. It really is a feeling. It's a perception.
Mhm.
But when you fail and you realize I'm actually at one step closer, and I don't really ever fail until I stop,
Mm.
it makes it easy to keep going.
Mm.
And
You can apply that to a lot of different filters too. And it's being in the high ticket space. The real bonus in here is not the money. The real bonus in here is everything you get exposed to. So in the past 4 years, I have worked with multiple different masterminds, multiple different ecom offers, all of these different coaching offers. I've learned about things that I didn't even know existed. And I have all of these ways that I can add to that and add them into a talent stack that I already have. And all of these things are coming together. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to go into high ticket for freedom and money. But all of the good stuff is the connections I've made, the lessons I've learned.
Yeah.
And I think if and that's what I try and say to new reps as well. Don't just focus on that money and take the horse blinkers off, see all of the cool stuff that's happening around you. And you're going to be exposed to things that are going to keep you interested and learning for decades to come, as
Yeah.
opposed to, I just want to make money.
It's insane the number of opportunities, and I love what you do, like constantly posting, constantly networking, taking interviews, giving value.
Yeah.
There's layers to that. Like I got an email yesterday that somebody gifted me ownership in their company. This is a company with 20,000. It's a SaaS with 20,000 users,
Oof.
and they gifted me a little piece of equity because I flew to them and networked for 2 days, and I consulted with them. We just whiteboarded. I could never have done that if I wasn't exposed to everything that I've been exposed to
Mm.
in the high ticket space. I sorry if anybody's listening to this in my SPG group and you're in car sales, like I love you, do your thing. But like it's hard for me to fathom going in on Saturday and Sunday for 12 hours a day, standing in the heat on a blacktop, talking to people who already have an ill perception of me and no exposure to anything to grow and to develop as a human being. Like that's such a hard pill to swallow.
Mm.
And I could never say that if we hadn't have crossed through these comfort zones and tried some new stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That life, it wasn't for me. And I understand some people make it work. It gives them their level of comfort or freedom that they think is okay for life. And that's fine. I'll never judge someone because of how they want to be. As long as there's a mutual respect, they're not going to give me a hard time for how I am. But
Sure.
I think I had a point that I was going to make. I think one thing you mentioned as well about going and networking with them. I connect with a lot of people consistently. And the goal that I have, not just on interviews, is to give and not take as much as I possibly can. And I know that's a big theme at the moment. But in the past week and a half, so I'm not going to mention any names, but there are still companies that I want to work with. There are companies and masterminds that are the cream of the cream of the cream. They are just, they're not even the top 1%. They're the benchmark. And in the past week,
I bet I know who you're talking about. Is it Genius Network one of them?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So they've been top of my list for a long time.
Yeah.
And they're really hard to connect with. And I've been trying to network and connect for some time. And in the past week, I have made an ask of 2 people in my network that are helping me out and making connections. The only reason I can do that is because I know in every other interaction, I give as much as I can. I help. I guide people wherever possible. And for me to make an ask, it has to be a big deal. And in the past week, 2 people have said, "Yep, I'm happy to help, and I'm happy to connect you to someone that will expedite that process and move it along." So it's very exciting.
That's cool. That's neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. So James, we went further than I thought we were going to do like 30 or 45 minutes. Instead, we did almost an hour and a half.
Yep.
I know you've got some freedom to get back to. I've got some kids I want to go spend some time with.
Yeah.
Man, I'm grateful for the rabbit holes we went down. I'm grateful for kicking your chickens in your chicken coop. ruffling your feathers and whatever, however we came to be here. I'm grateful for the value that you shared with my audience and for the time that you shared with me. I'm super excited for whatever is to come from this relationship, and I'm grateful to call you a friend. Is there any parting words? Here's where I'm going to give you permission right now. Tell people how is the best way to get in touch with you if they're interested in either learning from you, talking to you about either career coaching or interviewing, how to get jobs, negotiating those terms. Like, this is some of what you do outside of closing for other people. What's the best way for somebody to get a hold of you?
The best way is Facebook. So I'll get you to drop a link to my profile in the comments under this.
Sure.
So just add me on there, shoot me a message if you have any questions or need help with anything. It's weird that Facebook is the central hub for the space that we operate in. So it is by far the easiest way to get in contact with me.
You know what can I ask you to, like, this is from me. You have a newsletter. Will you share with the audience your newsletter, because it's that valuable? I want them to have it, and it is free.
It is.
Right?
It is, yeah. So every fortnight at this point, we're scaling up to every week. I on Sundays send out the Sunday Sales Pro, and it's not fluff. Some people do refer to me as James No Fluff Lawrence if they've seen anything I put together.
It's not a reference to your hair, is it?
No, it's definitely not. So in there's going to be actionable steps that you can take to either find a better role or earn more, as well as live life on your terms. So it's all very actionable stuff. There's nothing else in there.
That's awesome. James, thanks so much, man. I'm going to end the stream. Thanks everybody who did watch, who stayed, and who will watch this in the future. I appreciate you entrusting us with your time. Ciao for now.
Thank you.